Okay, so we've got our handle submit, whatever, right? Now, remember, if we didn't do this in ES6, we would have to bind this. Traditionally, it's bound in the constructor, right? That is still the norm. That's still something you'll see a lot. That still exists in all of the documentation of React. Okay, so like that's not a weird practice. Okay, it's just something that exists. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do handle. We said name change. This takes an event, and what we can do here is this.setState, and we'll pass in an object that has username pointing to event.target.value. Okay, and then we will essentially do the exact same thing for password and call this password. Okay. What's it complaining about? Oh, I probably have two exports. Okay. Okay, so now we've got that happening. Let's go ahead and just console log our state inside of our render so we can just see that it is updating and working. Okay, it's only for just seeing, right? Okay, so let's try it. So we go here, we see that our state starts with each thing being empty. I'll start writing in here, I'll write Corey. We see that it's updating our state, and I'll write something here. Updates that part of the state, we submit, and nothing happens. So our form's working, right? This is the expected behavior. This is the way we've been writing it. Now we have made a small change lately because it's not so fun to have these two things that are essentially identical. So instead we've been saying handle change. And instead of saying what we want as the username, we've been saying we've been doing brackets at e.target.name. And that's why we've been passing in this name property, because it makes our lives a little bit easier.
Okay. So when do we use the value for the input besides just having the state point to the value?
What do you mean by that?
So with the value for the input, we're setting it at the state of username and the state of password.
Yes.
So what are we, are we actually doing anything with it?
It's just the correct practice. Okay. Yeah, so his question is what are we doing with that value that we're showing in the inputs, that just the value of the state? And right now we're not really doing anything with it, we're just doing the best practice, which is having an input that's totally controlled. But you can think of have you ever written something and then click edit after you've already posted it? And then, is it clear or does it refill? It refills, right? So why does it refill? Because it's pointing to state, right? Because if I already wrote something in here, let's say I had a component did mount that went and grabbed my specific post and I wrote lil mama or something, right? It starts, and I could be like, oh, there we go. I meant to capitalize my M. Now I'll save my post, right? So that's how edits work. It doesn't just randomly put the text there. It's because it's pointing to something. Okay, so that's important. That's something we're going to have to accept and do, right? And this is the same for your selects.
So why doesn't the value show up on the input, even being that we have value? Oh, it does.
It did show up.
Okay, it was empty. Okay.
It was there. Now it's not going to be there. Okay. So this is the old way we've been writing. Let's convert this over to into a hook, using a hook. All right, let's pretend I don't totally know how these work. I'm going to start with a no const, I'm going to turn this into a function. I go, okay. So far that looks good. Hooks don't have a render, right? A functional component. So I'm going to go, okay, I don't need this render. So I'm just going to remove the render. Go, okay. Great. So now I have some state here. So there's a couple different ways we can do this. I'm going to show you the first way. So we got to use this hook use state. So we got to import this from React. So I'm going to do a comma, just like how we used to do the component, destructure it. And I'll call it use state. And so use state gives us back an array of 2 items, always. The 2 items are the value and the function that can update that value.
The value and the function that can update the value.
Yes, so if I had state here, I could say, all right, I could go const, and I could go ahead and get an array to destructure this form. So I could say state and set state. And I could point this to use state, and I could say, I could pass anything I wanted. So I could pass, this is the initial value of state. So for now, I'm just going to pass in the array we had. I mean the object. Okay, so now I have some form of state. I still have this set state as well.
So state and set state comes from the use state.
So these are what I'm calling it. I could call these anything. I could call this cat. Traditionally, the second thing is set whatever the first thing was. So this would be set cat. Right? That doesn't make any sense in this instance, right? Because cat and set cat. It would if I was making, maybe had a cat object that I was creating. So for now, I'm just going to call this state and set state. I'm doing the minimal amounts of change from the previous code. I wish I had the other one, because that would make my life a little bit easier to show this. Okay. I think I can still pull this off. So handle change, we can do, we have it loose like that, right? How do we create a function? What do we need? Const, right? So now I have const handle change. I'll have my const handle submit. I can't call set state here, right?
I can't call set state.
Well, I can't say this dot set state, but I do want to update the state. But I have a function now called set state to do that. So I can just go ahead and remove the this.
Set state.
And I have to use a new object. And so I don't want to lose my whole state right now. Because right now my state is a whole object key value. So I can't just say the one key and the one value. Sets, our use state doesn't work that way. So, but I can destructure a state. I can go ... state. And then I can overwrite that. That should work. If it doesn't, that's okay. We'll go back to something else. Yeah, don't worry. We have console log. Well, there's no longer a this because we're in a functional component. So I'm just going to say state. I can extrapolate username and state. Sure, just from state now. It's no longer this dot handle submit, right? Because it's just handle submit. Our value is still username, password, but our handle change is now just handle change. And I think we've updated this. And let's see if this works. Yep.
What's the difference between how you're destructuring it on line 4 with the array and how you're destructuring it on 17? Why are you destructuring it like with the square brackets on line 4?
Oh, on line 4. So use state gives back an array. This evaluates an array. The array has a length of 2. The first argument is whatever the state is, or whatever that value is. The second argument is a function to set or update that value. So we're just destructuring those two things out. Okay, let's see if this works. We go here, we have our form still. As we type, it works. Kind of cool. A functional component with state. Not a lot of change. A lot of you might not think this is a huge improvement yet. That's okay. I'm willing to continue to sell you on the idea. So let's talk about this a bit more. So destructuring state each time is kind of weird, and it's not totally like you can do what we just did here, where we destructure our we spread our state and then override it at the merge. The more standard way of doing this is a little bit different. Let's look at the more standard way. So instead of doing this, so I'll just comment it out for you. Go ahead and delete it. I will create two versions. So I'm going to say const, an array, and I'm going to call this username. And this is going to be called set username. And I will call use state, thank you, and pass in an empty string. And I will do that again for our password. So I'm going to call this password and set password. And that is equal to use state. And, oh, I should also announce, now that we are introducing hooks, my expectation of you is to do all of your labs from now on and all of your work in hooks. Okay? If you don't feel like you've mastered classes yet, definitely continue to work on those on your own time. And your calculator project can still be, obviously, as a class component and stuff. You don't have to. I mean, bonus points if you refactor, but you don't have to. You'll find that refactoring it is not as hard as you think, especially as we go through today. Okay, so this is the more standard way of writing this, where we have two things. And I'm going to go ahead and remove this handle change for right now and get rid of that. Our handle submit's not doing much. I no longer have a state to log, so I'm going to remove that. I no longer need to destructure these because I already just have them as my variables from up here, username and password. So I don't need that either. I will, for fun, console log those things though. Console.log, I'll say username and password, just so we can see. On submit, we're still calling handle submit. Value on change, we no longer can call handle change, but instead we could go ahead and say, like, pass in an anonymous function here if we wanted. That would just call set username, and in my set username, sorry about that pop-up, inside of my set username, I pass in whatever the new value will be. So what will that be? d.target.value, right? And I can do the same thing for here. So this would be called handle, what did we call it? Set password. And that would just take in d.target.value as well. Okay? So we've added an anonymous function there. Yep.
Can you go back to the top where you're defining the username and password?
So we don't have to.
I could make functions up here and call them. And one would be set name and the other one would be.
So for every single piece of state that we want to control, we're going to have to create a new state.
Interesting.
For it.
Yeah.
Really?
That's generally the standard practice. So for every different piece of state in there, you'll want to use a new use state. It's not as bad as you think. You'll actually see that this is substantially shorter than what we've written. Yeah, especially if we delete the commented out code, it's only like 5 lines right now. It's 8 lines. Okay, let's make sure that this is still working. So let's save this. We have a username is not defined. Did I misspell something? Yes. Didn't put a capital there. All right, and let's go check our work. So I'm going to type something in. I'll say Corey Ladovsky. Okay, so we are still able to update our name and password. Right? So just to recap, all we're doing is we have a use state for the username. We're having a set username, password, set password. This is the syntax. You'll be writing like this over and over and over again throughout your React lives. We still have the same values. We don't even have to destructure them because they've already been taken out when we destructured the array. And then we have our onChange, where we're just calling our set username and our set password. Not bad. Not too bad. Yeah, Rafiq.
Can you just explain one more time when you took out the content, why did you take that out from the rest of it?
I'm not going to use it.
Oh, you got rid of it in the return as well, right?
What return? Yeah, I have this here on the onChange.
Okay.
And the handle submit, are we using in the?
Yeah, we still are using handle submit. It's still here. I mean, we're not doing anything with it. We're just making it so the page doesn't refresh. So this is a big improvement in line count. So I guess I'll jump into this part here. So there is this idea where you could be saying, well, yeah, that's great, Corey. But there still seems to be like, this is kind of a pain in the ass. This seems like really duplicate code in a sense. Like they're doing the same things, so it's kind of weird, right? Would anybody feel that way? Yes. So you can make your own hooks. I'll just demonstrate kind of a light personal hook that you can make. And you can keep your own hooks, custom hooks in their own file, or you could import them. So let's actually just go ahead and make that file. That wouldn't be part of components. I'll go in source. I'll make a file called util for utilities. I'll make a file here. Let me call them custom hooks.js. Okay, so let's go ahead and make essentially the same hook that we're using. Let's make a hook that replicates all the things we're already doing.
Util was a file or something?
I created a folder called util. See? Okay. So what do we need to import from React? Yeah, right? Because we're going to be using state. So I'll say import use state. I don't need JSX or anything, so I'm not importing React. From React. And now we can go ahead and make our own custom hook. So I'm going to start with exporting it. Export. Const. Nope. No JSX understanding. Nothing's being returned here. We're just going to use the hook. So we say export const. What should I call this? What should I start with this, at least? Use, right? That's the hook rule. Everything starts with use. So we decided to replicate. Now we're using this for two what? What type of things are we trying to make? What are we changing here? Yeah, they're inputs, right? These are both inputs that essentially have the same type of things. So I'm going to call this custom hook. I'm going to call this use input. Okay. Use input should probably take in some sort of, well, we'll see. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so we've got our basic function here, and we decided that we're going to use state, right? It's going to be the same type of thing we've already written. So I'm going to write const. So I'm going to do my array. I'm going to call this value. I'm going to say set value. This is just going to represent whatever. I'm going to call use state. I have to put in some sort of initial argument, right? What should I put in? How do I know? Like, what should I write? Henry? You think it should be an array at default? There's no E. This is just our initial value.
Username and password?
I don't know. Yeah. How do we know that? This is a function. Doug?
Value
Which value?
is the string called value.
Oh, then it'll all have an initial value of a string called value, no matter what. Isaiah?
An argument passed in.
An argument passed in? That sounds like a good idea, right? This is a function. We have variables. We can have an initial state or value. We'll call that initial value. I like that name better. Where does this, how do we get this? Pass it in as an argument. Perfect. Okay. Great. Right. So we're just seeing we can build our own hooks. So with this, what do we need to be able to do to an input?
Update the state.
We need to be able to update the state. Okay, so let's go ahead and write our handle change. This takes in what? Anything?
E.
E, right, yeah. Because we'll call this when there's an E. And this would call set value on e.target.value. All right, so we've created this function. This is a slight abstraction from what we've been doing. Don't worry, we're going to have multiple examples. All right, so this is just a function. So we get to choose what we want to return. Right? We can return anything we want. Right? So just because that one hook returns an array with 2 items doesn't mean this one has to. So I'm going to return an object for fun. It's going to have a value property that points to the value. And I'm going to have a on change that points to my handle change. Right, so now I have a value property that points to a value and my on change that points to a handle change. And I would say that this custom hook is done for what I need it to be. So let's see how we can use this. Okay, so now let's import it. So we can go ahead and import, and I'm going to say use input from and // util / custom hooks. So with this, there's some changes here, right? We no longer need to use state at all even, because our hook's handling that for us. So now I can go ahead and say const username. This would be the object. Here, maybe I'll make it more obvious. Username object. And I can call use input. And the initial argument for that is an empty string. And I can do the same thing for password object. Okay, so now I have a username object and a password object. Remember, each one of these objects has a value property that points to a value, and an on change that points to a handle change, right? Do we remember that? Each object looks like this. Value pointing to value, on change pointing to handle change. Each hook has its own spot.
So you basically took the state and you moved it into a custom hook.
That's right. I took the state and I moved it to a custom hook. Exactly correct. I should mention, before I forget also, there are some rules about hooks. They have to be at the top level of your function. You cannot use a hook like in a conditional. Somebody made a joke once that said, like, you have to love hooks unconditionally. Okay, you cannot put them in a conditional. I didn't write that joke, that's why that joke didn't kill. Yeah, thank you very much. All right. Take that, Ryan, from React conference. Okay. So now, I don't even need to pass these value and handle change because I already have these. What?
It's getting crazy.
Remember, this is what my object looks like in the custom hook? It has these key and values, right? Do we remember that? This was an object, value pointing to value, on change pointing to handle change. Well, that's what my objects are. So I could just say, I could just object destructure here and say dot 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 user name object. Oops. And here I could do dot 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 user or password object, sorry.